One of the biggest reasons that this podcast platform exists is to share the stories of women who are making their unique mark on the world. And my guest today shares a similar passion for sharing stories and amplifying voices that often go unheard. Stacey Lindsay is a multimedia journalist, a writer, media consultant, and speaker. She has had an incredible career, which we will talk about in this episode, including her position as the longtime articles editor at Goop, and now to being the editorial director of The Conscious Investor, a weekly digital magazine that she co-founded, which uncovers the world of philanthropy and social impact. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We haven't even started the interview, and already my cheeks hurt from smiling because this is a woman who has quickly become a close friend. It's funny to say. It's like when people say that they fall in love with their significant other and they don't know how it happened so quickly. Truly, you and I connected, and it was like soul friendship from the very beginning. So, Stacey, I'm so grateful to have you here and to get to share your light with the world, because people need to know who you are and everything that you are up to.
Oh, Lindsay, thank you so much. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but here right now. Thank you.
Oh, and we even see we're already on the level that we coordinated our outfits. We're both wearing a black top and that's where we're at, in case you were wondering.
So true.
World. So, okay, you and I always love to give a little context for how women come into my life, because it's actually one of the questions that I get asked most frequently is, gosh, Lindsay, how do you meet these phenomenal women? How do you have this circle of these phenomenal individuals? And you and I were connected through a mutual friend. She has been on the podcast, Jen Gottlieb. We have to send her some love for playing matchmaker.
Send Jen love every day, every minute. I love that woman so much. She's incredible.
Every day. And that's such a great reminder that for me, as I started to meet women who I just loved what they were about, Jen was one of those people who, you just want to be around her. Those women know other women like that.
Yes.
So it's always okay to ask to be connected with people who are like-minded, and then to be the one who generously does that as well when you see that you could do some matchmaking, some friendship matchmaking. So Jen, we are sending you so much love. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And it gives me a lot of hope, I have to say, because I still feel like I'm that little girl in third grade. And I always use third grade as an example because third grade was not a good year for me. I had thick glasses. I had the works. I had braces really early with the elastic that went diagonally across my mouth, all of it. And there was bullying. And I remember just thinking at that time, why, what's going on? Why was it so hard to have friends or to build these friendships? And of course, I'm explaining a little bit, of course I have a lot of wisdom now compared to then. Meeting people like you, meeting people like Jen today, it's just so much proof in that when you really honor who you are and you really trust yourself, those incredible people come into your life. And if only I had known that when I was in third grade, I would have gone through so much less pain. But it's the other beautiful reason too. It's incredible to have this community as an adult woman, but also just looking back and saying it all works out.
Yeah. Oh, I would love to go back and hug the version of me who also had very thick glasses. I never had braces, but I've never shared this on the podcast before, but I had, when my adult teeth grew in, brown stains on the front of my teeth. So you can just imagine the things in third and fourth grade that were said about my brown teeth. But,
those were probably so amplified in your mind too. They weren't a big deal, I'm sure, but they were so amplified in your mind. I know.
Oh, okay. So we're sending love to our third grade selves.
Yes, always.
So my first introduction to you before Jen made the personal introduction was the call that she hosted where you graciously were giving your wisdom about how businesses can be presenting themselves in the media and, how we can authentically right now be sharing our our light. And your career ties in so beautifully with that because you, for the last, we'll just say several years, we don't need to put a timestamp on it, but you have really built your career as a journalist and in media. So will you take me back to, I actually have never gotten the chance to ask you this. What inspired a career in journalism? Like, was that third grade girl, did she know she wanted to tell stories? Or when did that become clear that that was going to be your gift to the world?
Oh gosh, it was probably it was before I was 10 years old. And it was watching Diane Sawyer. It was watching Christiane. It was watching all these incredibly brave women on the TV. And I was rapt when I would watch them. I remember the sound of the news, when NBC News would come on and CBS News. I can still remember that because it was such a pastime too. And I'm making myself sound like I'm a million years old. I'm
Right.
not. But still, news is so different nowadays. We don't really sit down for the 5 o'clock news. I was enamored by it. And I was enamored by it for reasons that I didn't know at the time. But as I started to actually see, there was a theme when I was in school and eventually when I went into college too, is I wanted to tell stories. I loved writing, but even more so, I loved asking people questions. And I went into college and I did an internship at WBZ4, which is a CBS affiliate for Boston. I shadowed Sharon Alfonsi, who is a huge journalist today. I still pinch myself, and she's on 60 Minutes, that I was able to just hang with her in the van and go with her to these stories. That was a real turning point for me, where I wanted to be a part of perpetuating the information and perpetuating the message. Interestingly, I pivoted in undergrad and I ended up getting my undergrad degree in film. And I went on to work in the film industry for several years. And that was so formative because of the obvious reasons. I was working in the film industry, and I was living in New York. And then ultimately I moved to LA and I was working for this huge director actor at the time, who I learned so much from him. So storytelling was still a huge theme, but there was still this something inside me that I was not totally satisfied. When are we ever really totally satisfied, of course? But there was really more. And it was bugging me because I didn't end up pursuing that journalism path. Of course, as things happen in life, sometimes the way they unfold, you have to see real darkness, I think, sometimes in order to see the light to help you down a certain path you want to go down. And I lost my father very suddenly. And it was when I went back, he was in Massachusetts where I grew up, to spend the last week with him. I just thought, because he was always the one watching the news with me too. He always knew how much I loved Diane Sawyer, and I got to do this to honor him. So I went to graduate school for journalism. And then after that, I've been a journalist since. So, and it's neat to see that journalism now, of course, isn't just the traditional, as I mentioned before, it's not always the sit down traditional news, even though I did work in that for quite some time, but it's taking different forms, which is so exciting.
Mm.
And when I went to grad school for journalism at the time, people were saying, this is crazy. Why are you doing this? The economy was definitely not in a good place. Journalism was not in a good place at all, meaning magazines were folding, newspapers were folding. And I thought, now is the most important time to become a journalist. Why journalists are even. And yeah, it's something I'm really, really proud of, is just finally turning and honoring that.
Yeah, which it's cool that you said it. One of the notes that I had written down that I think bonded us pretty quickly was I also share that passion for sharing stories. It's actually the whole reason why we started a podcast, to have another platform to share more women's stories. So what is it about stories that make them so important to share? How do stories play into media and journalism, and like what we see from the outside looking in? What fundamentally makes stories so powerful?
I think there's several reasons. Stories are the blood of life. It's what makes the world go round. And then you think of the obvious reasons why we need information. We need information, obviously, to stay informed. We need information to be proactive citizens in all the ways that we can be, of course. But particularly, how do you get information to really click with somebody? How do you get a viewer, a reader, a listener to really engage with the information that you're disseminating? And it's through narrative, it's through story, it's through connecting. It's through telling somebody's experience, good and bad, good or bad, whatever it may be. That's when you get somebody to resonate. That's when I think change really happens. And that's when somebody feels emboldened. And there's so many things I want to say about it. And sometimes I lack the words, which isn't a good thing as a writer, but it is, to me, it is actually everything. So going back to what I said, I think it's the blood, the absolute blood of life. Also too, it's important to see the things that are underneath the rocks and in between the cracks. And you do that so beautifully, Lindsay, with the women and the people that you interview. Is, of course, there's the kind of traditional news stories, it bleeds, it leads, or the salacious X, Y, and Z tale that they know is going to, or the catchy headline. That's all fine. I'm really interested in the nuance, the quieter pieces, maybe the people who haven't had their story told, or the people who haven't had a really chance to amplify their voices. That's what I think is the biggest honor. So I've actually said, because when I think it's interesting when you kind of look at your entire day and what makes for a very satisfying, successful day, for me, it's being able to interview somebody. And depending on whatever medium I'm working in at the time, I want the finished piece to be out there, of course, that's the point. But my satisfaction comes from the interview. So at the time when I used to work in TV, I didn't care about being on TV or going live. I actually found it was amazing, but it was also really, really stressful. But the fact that person let me into their home, that person opened up and shared with me, that's the biggest honor. So it's just a mix of so many things. It's information, it's resonating with people, and it's absolutely, from my end, it's reverence.
Yes. And interesting that we're having our conversation at the time that we are, where there's a lot going on in the world. And what has impacted me the most, whenever I feel powerless, I step in and I listen to someone's story. I listen to their lived experience and just look from the standpoint of, if I'm one human being and I can influence one human being, what could I do right now?
Exactly.
Listening to someone's story, their real experience, and it may be very different from my own.
Exactly.
You put that so eloquently. Words are definitely not a problem for you. I could really just listen all day. But I love that you brought this up about, especially right now, the media is getting a lot of attention for maybe showcasing just one side of a story, and this isn't a new conversation, right? What's your perspective on maybe it's the role of media within our world, as someone who has been on all sides of it? What is the responsibility of the media, or maybe what's our responsibility as those consuming it?
That's such a great, important question. And I'm so glad that you added to that as well, because it's twofold. Of course, the media has a responsibility. And of course, as consumers, the onus is on us as well. And I don't say that to be a Debbie Downer. And I don't say that to say, oh my gosh, we're all loaded with massive amounts of homework, but it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. We have to fact check. We have to be engaged. We have to be proactive. It's incredibly important for two reasons, because unfortunately, maybe the information that is out there from whatever source it may be isn't inclusive, isn't considering all sides. And also two, again, because I love journalists are human, mistakes are made.
Yeah.
So you have to be diligent on the consumer end. I had a photography lesson. It was funny. I took one photography lesson in my life, and this was many years ago when I was in Montana. And it was just a special treat I gave myself one Saturday. And this woman said to me, she says, make sure every time you're out in the field photographing whatever you are, stop for a moment and turn around and look behind you. Because sometimes maybe that's your shot behind you. That's so stuck with me. That's the responsibility of journalists in the media, is to take a beat. And I know it's so incredibly hard because the news cycle is 24 hours. There's never a breath right now. But every instance that we're in affords to us to take a beat. I really feel like that, to take a beat and to consider, okay, was I as inclusive as I could possibly be for this story? Did I include every perspective? Did I include the people for this and against this? Did I include, maybe the people somewhat in the middle? It's imperative. And I don't see that as much. And I'm a huge advocate for local journalism, which I think doesn't get the credit that it deserves, and regional journalism as well. Having been a local TV reporter, it was really interesting, Lindsay, because we were a duopoly. So the station I was at was both a Fox affiliate and the CBS affiliate. Now, I will openly say, again, as a journalist, I want to always remain neutral and interview, again, everybody that I possibly can. But I've always been a very, very progressive person, of course. So it was very interesting for my peers and my community to be like, you're going to work for Fox? But what was really fascinating about it is on the local level, at the time I was working at the station, we had complete freedom. And they really, my particular news director and my bosses really preached to me, include everyone. Don't be biased. Work hard against that every day, no matter what story you're doing. And I thought that was amazing. And so again, I just feel that local journalism, again, just it's underfunded, of course, but there's just such these incredible, that's where you get these really true, well-balanced stories, I feel like. And if you look at some of the biggest stories, even in the past year, Jeffrey Epstein, that was broke by a local newspaper in Miami, actually wasn't broke by the national news. So, but again, taking that beat and looking at any and every possible facet that you can to include. And I know that is a big thing to bite off, but it's incredibly important.
Well, especially in the age of social media where everything is so shareable, just immediately shareable. And it's something that I take really seriously is only sharing something if I have maybe looked into, well, what would the other perspective of this be? Or, it's just an interesting time where things are shareable, but then also, you don't always necessarily know if the entire story is being shared. We could, of course, go down that rabbit hole, but I think you summed it up so well that, well, it's not necessarily something that any of us are maybe realize we have the responsibility to do. But I think the way that we're going to start to have healing conversations is to include all stories, all voices. Yeah.
And I always recommend, I recommend this a lot for various instances in life, but I always recommend, feel free to reach out and have grace, obviously. And I think, and have empathy as much as you can. Empathy goes so long, it's so important, so it goes such a long way, but reach out to a journalist. And if you saw a certain story that you felt, gosh, I feel like they really didn't include this, or they really didn't consider that, kindly reach out to them and maybe ask them. Maybe there's a reason why, or maybe you can crack open a well of possibility for that particular journalist too. The act of simply reaching out to somebody with humility and grace, I think, goes such a long way.
Wow. And just that reminder that they're human too.
They're human too. And again, they're under constraints. Maybe they have a news director who's in a bad mood that day, and they said, just go out and get whatever you can. I mean, it's tough. It is a tough gig.
Yeah. So I want to kind of circle back to how your career has unfolded, because, and this was prior to you and I meeting, but you spent several years as the articles editor at Goop. Some may be familiar, just a small little content platform there. And then you've pivoted and you've launched several platforms yourself. Do you want to talk? We have so many conversations with women in our community about knowing when to pivot. And it's especially difficult when, you could look from the outside and say, wow, that's a pretty prestigious position. It's a name that people know. Or, I came from a business that was doing really well and chose to pivot into a business that I had no certainty it would. And you look back and you're like, wow, why did I do that? But it's almost for me, it was like there was really no explanation for it other than just a knowing. I'm curious just how that journey has unfolded for you as you've made different career pivots along the way.
It's fun because what you and I were talking about a little bit before we hit record, we were talking about this time has been, I think, evoking so much in all of us, of course. But I ultimately think so much growth. And what happens when you're going through a period of growth, which I think is consistently throughout our lives, but when you're going through a big, big, big impending change, period of growth, a potential pivot, you feel really uncomfortable. Growing it's not comfortable. And sometimes it physically doesn't feel good. It's tiring. And there's so much information in how you physically feel that I think, again, hindsight's interesting. I have the wisdom now looking back. And so I'm trying to use that as I continue to move forward. But I look back before I've made these changes and I thought, wow, I was so uncomfortable. My body was telling me so many things that it was time.
Yeah.
But yes, I have to say throughout my career, every single thing that I have done where it's been the result of me, again, taking a beat and genuinely looking within, not considering anything else on the exterior, looking within, that has been the most beneficial. Those have been the most beneficial decisions, I have to say.
Yeah.
Very easy to say, of course, when you can kind of just sit back and we're comfortable having a great conversation here and be like, oh yeah. I mean, there's so much, it's a quagmire sometimes. Like, what am I doing when you're going through a change?
Yes.
But every single time I've really listened to myself. And I have to say that it hasn't really made sense to anybody but me. But things that I think is happening right now. And I hope that young women graduating or coming into the workplace, whatever their paths are, understand that the working world is drastically changing. Gone are the days, I think, of staying, and these days have long been gone, are the days of staying at one particular institution or having that particular institution be your identity and being loyal. People are creating these beautiful constellations of careers, and maybe to somebody else, it's like, you're going to do what? But you got your degree in this, or you're going to do what? You don't have a degree in that. If you have a drive and a desire to really listen to that. So my trajectory, I mean, I went from, as I said, doing an internship in journalism, and then I went and worked in the film industry for several years. And I went back to grad school for journalism. And then my actual journalism career has kind of been wild and all over the place. And it's funny because I worked in print first, digital in print. And then I didn't have technically any experience except for that internship a while previous before I went to grad school. I didn't have any experience in TV, but I went and there was something telling me. And I didn't want to take the traditional route. I didn't want to go be an anchor here and then an anchor at a bigger market and then ultimately an anchor in New York. I wanted to go and get my hands and feet dirty. I wanted to be in the thick of it. I wanted to learn these new tools. And then I wanted to use that for a new mixed media career. But still people are like, what are you doing? It's so crazy. It's wild. But I put together a fake tape. I told them it was fake, but I put together a fake tape because I didn't have any sort of a reel, and then just cold emailed some of these stations, and I was able to get this wonderful job in TV. But it's been, I jump all over the place because really I feel like that's the only way to kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
It's sort of been ultimately all over the place. But I think the theme, Lindsay, though, is every time I've made a shift or made a big pivot, I've always thought, what do I want to learn? What new tools do I want to learn? And that was really one of the reasons, if not the biggest reason, why after I left news, I went to Goop. At the time, Goop, which is huge now, at the time, Goop was relatively small. And I thought, they're doing something incredible. Gwyneth is doing something really just irreverent and different and refreshing. And I thought, I have all these tools that I just learned from the news business. This is not the obvious trajectory, but I think I can bring something to this platform. And ultimately, what can I learn from them? Who are the people that I can potentially meet? So that was my driving force. And then one of the biggest reasons why I decided it was time to pivot from Goop, this huge institution, huge name, and it's been several months now that I left my full-time position. And it was scary because you don't leave Goop, everybody loves Goop, but there was something inside me. I thought there's something fresh and new and bold that I want to do.
And there were so many things there that I just want to underline. I want to put this on a t-shirt, a bumper sticker, wear it all over and I really want to make sure people heard this, because you said that at the time you knew it was time to make a move, often it didn't make sense to anyone else but you. And that can often make it an even more difficult decision than it might be otherwise. But deep down, developing that self-awareness to know, especially if you're being called to chart a path that hasn't been charted, it's going to feel, I always describe it like, it's like you're walking into a thick fog. You have no idea where it leads, but you also feel like something kind of exciting might be waiting on the other side. So I love how you so eloquently said that. And it literally is the reason this community and podcast exists, is to tell stories like yours. So women know that when they're at that starting point and feeling all of those feelings, that they're not alone.
And the ethos speaks to you, Lindsay, your book. I love the story behind your book, because you were saying, at the time before you started writing it, I'm not a writer. oh my gosh, can you imagine if you did, but you had a gut, you had something in you. And that book was already written, that was inside of you, and it was bigger than you too. That's the other really important thing to remember is when we have this gut, innate feeling, whatever it is, it's actually not really about us too. It's so much bigger. We have to make this pivot because we don't know it at the time, but because so many of these women are going to be, and I'm not saying this in a narcissistic way, I'm saying this in a genuine way, so many of these women are going to be impacted, and they're going to impact you in return, obviously. But can you imagine if you listen to that? I'm not a writer at the time, and you didn't write that book. I know I would be worse off. I know so many people, we wouldn't have your beautiful work out there. So it speaks to that too. There's nothing's ever properly ordered in a row. It's never like that.
No. Okay.
And
Well,
they don't teach
there you
us that
go.
when we're young too. So
Isn't that the truth? Oh my goodness. Yeah. And you are so generous. And I think about, this is why I'm a big believer in writing, whether someone wants to write a book or they do it just for themselves, because when I was going through that season and I was actually writing the book, there were certain things that I couldn't describe it. This is going to sound very woo, but that's fine. I'm good with going there. That words would come through and onto the page, and I was very clear that like I didn't know to say that. And that was the one line that carried me through was when I wrote the part about, it's not about you, it's about who you'll serve. That actually came through for me. And then I knew it was supposed to also be in the book, but you never know what's going to happen when you start to just take the littlest baby step toward that thing you're really feeling called to do. It's magical.
And those baby steps are incredibly powerful too,
Yeah.
because the way we tend to think, the human brain, we kind of will get this idea and then we'll think, oh my gosh, how am I going to tackle that? How am I going to do that? But once the best example that I can give, or best analogy I can give from my own experience is, let's say, an article. I think, okay, and I love writing articles. I love it. I love everything about it. But still, sometimes I'm like, shoot, I've got this dooming deadline and this, long article. I don't even know where I'm going to be. I keep putting it off. But once I finally actually sit down to start writing it and take even just the first 3 words, it's never as hard as you think it is, because you chunk it out in baby steps.
Yeah.
Once you sit down and start doing it, and then before you know it, you have a book, or you have a change that's already happened, or so many amazing things.
Oh, but you're right. It's the starting that feels the most daunting, but when you get the momentum, that's really where it starts to come alive. Oh, I love that. That's so well said. Okay, so talk to me about one of your newer projects, The Conscious Investor, because it's going to tie everything together that we've said thus far, the storytelling, the kind of stories that you wanted to be sharing. So share maybe the inspiration behind it and what that platform really stands for.
It's a beautiful example of what I was saying earlier, that I made the change from news to go to Goop because I wanted to learn some news tools, and ultimately I wanted to meet people. And of course, I didn't know who I was going to meet yet, but I knew I was going to meet some amazing people. And one of those incredible people is Eva Yazhari, who is the founder of Beyond Capital Fund, and she also is the co-founder of The Conscious Investor. Eva and I collaborate on the magazine together. Eva, she has cracked open so much possibility in my life. But really where it started was, she and I first met when I was working at Goop, and I was the articles editor, and she approached me. She actually, again, so much power in just reaching out. She reached out to Goop, and I think it originally the email landed on one of my other editors' inboxes, but was sent my way. And we started having a conversation about collaborating on an article about impact investing. At the time, again, scrappy journalist, I just had started writing a little bit about financial health for Goop. So I'm always the curious one. I'm always doing research, but I don't have any real investment or knowledge of the financial world at all. And I thought, okay, this is really fascinating, but I don't know if this is really for me. But still, this is an important piece. Let me learn everything I can, and let's do the piece. We collaborated on this piece about impact investing. And I'll just briefly say, for anybody listening who doesn't know what impact investing is, it is investing with the intention to make a social or environmental impact, and a social and environmental impact that you can measure in tandem with a financial return. So it's like twofold. It's like traditional investing, but better, because you make the world better. You make a great impact. after we finished on the first piece, I thought, okay, Eva herself is absolutely incredible. This woman, as she is one that walks the talk. She talks it and she really goes there and she really walks it. And she is invested in these companies that are really, really profoundly making a positive impact in the world. We collaborated on another piece for Goop, and then we developed this great relationship. And ultimately, the Conscious Investor started. We were having lunch one day, a conversation, quite frankly, and Eva she's very hungry and very curious and open-minded, and she really wanted to extend all this information that she had. She envisioned more for it. I thought, you have so many incredible stories. You have such an incredible network. I think of some of the people that I've met through Eva. I'm internally grateful for it. I said, this is a time to start telling this, getting this content out there. What I love about it though, Lindsay, which I'm so proud about, is we approach it. So it's called, again, the Conscious Investor. And the nucleus is really impact investing. But I'm so proud because we each approach it with our own unique perspectives. And Eva has the deep financial knowledge. She worked on Wall Street. She's been an impact investor and then by the classic definition for many years. Again, I'm the scrappy journalist. I'm the one just learning about this, but what I bring to it is impact investing is more than actually just, first of all, it's for everybody. It doesn't have to be intimidating. It doesn't have to be for if you have thousands and thousands of liquid cash on hand. It can be for everybody. And it also can take different forms. So I'm really interested in telling the stories about the impact component. Technically, you can make impact maybe if you don't have the money to invest in this company, but you have the intellect, you have the time, you have the curiosity to maybe call the company and see, can they change their practices, or are they being inclusive on their board? So there's many ways we can make impact. So it's really fun. We kind of bring both of our perspectives and both of our ends of the spectrum, if you will, to it. And yeah, we do profiles and incredible change makers and Q&As and sort of thorough research-based articles. It's been a really fun project. And it's also been an outlet too, because I feel I've always been very inclined, I don't know if I deserve the word activist, but I have always really been charged by doing the right thing and doing the thing that betters the social movement at large. And I feel like this is my contribution. So it's been an amazing outlet for me.
Oh, and the articles that I've had the opportunity to read, both written by you and by other brilliant minds, it really is a different, it's telling stories, but in such a different way. It's the stories that really give you hope, even when they're bringing up real issues facing our world. It's just truly inspiring. The words are really hard to put together to say just what I feel when I'm consuming the content there. And I cannot wait to watch it grow and continue to impact the world in the way that it is.
Oh, Lindsay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for reading it.
It's really just so well done. And my goodness, I could truly sit, we could talk all afternoon. But as we start to really bring this to a close, tie it with a beautiful bow, what would you say you want women who are, let's even tie it back to our conversation about pivoting and really just that deep knowing there's something more or there's a new thing for them to learn. What do you really want them to know and hear from someone who has also been through that experience, just about what the next step might be?
I want them to know the power in the question. There's such incredible power in asking questions. And if there is one takeaway, even though there's millions, but if there's one takeaway I think that I've learned from this life, finally, and it's taken me a while, it's nothing is absolute and nothing can be perfectly sort of tied up in terms of like the messiness of life and our personal lives and also in terms of our career. What we can do is continuously be curious and we continuously ask questions of ourselves and ask questions of those around us and ask questions of the world at large. And that's what I find myself more interested to really in the writing that I do and in the writing that I read and the content that I read too. I'm not as much interested in this sort of perfect ending because that's not life. I wish it were, it would be so much easier and lovely, but it's not. And we know that today too. The most important, there's no room for passivity at all, but there is room for continued education and continued learning and continued asking of the many, many questions that are out there to be asked. So, and it may sound sort of vague, but start with, what do I want to learn? What do I want to know? What wisdom do I want? What questions do I wish somebody would ask of me? Asking those questions, there's just such beauty in there, and that'll lead you down paths that I think you just never thought were possible.
So well said. Could not have been a better way to bring our time together to a close. Before we end, though, I do want you to share where can we find you, support your work? Where are the best places for people to connect?
Thank you. Well, I on my site, if you want to read any of my pieces or watch anything, it's Stacey Ann, ANN, Lindsay.com. I always say I'm a little bit of a reluctant social media person, but I'm getting better because I think there's such a power and such a beauty to social media. And I realized, I'm going to do it my way. It doesn't have to be this way or that way. I'm going to do it my way. So I am on Instagram, and I love it when people reach out too. I'm at Stacey Lindsay on Instagram. And I always am so happy to get messages. So those are the two best ways.
And we'll link all of it, including the Conscious Investor, in the show notes so people can easily find you. So one final question, and this has been so fun to hear different women's perspectives on personal perspectives. It's something I've really been leaning into myself, which is stopping to acknowledge myself along the way toward working on these big goals and dreams that I have. So we quite simply call it your powerhouse moment. So it's a moment that, whether it was big or small, you're stopping to acknowledge, I really handled myself well, or I really learned something, or I can see my own greatness in that moment. So it could be literally anything big or small that has happened in the last few weeks, but a moment that right now you can look back and go, you know what? I was a powerhouse in that moment. What would it be? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
I wanted to interview a woman I had been wanting to interview a woman for about a year. And I believe the intentions were right from the other end, but I was not granted the opportunity to interview that person for the original publication that I pitched this interview for various reasons, but reasons that I just didn't believe in. They went against my values. I wanted to interview this particular woman because this woman is doing incredible work on the front lines of activism. She's an iconoclast. She is doing it her own way. And I thought it didn't feel right. I thought, why can't I interview her? Because she's maybe doesn't have as big of a social media following or whatever it may be. I really festered. It bothered me. I didn't like it, but I stayed true to myself. And just the other day, I interviewed that woman for the Conscious Investor. So we'll read about her coming up in the future too. And I think I felt like a powerhouse woman because I stayed true to my values. I know every single person has so much to say. And I know that this particular woman, and so I stayed true to myself too, because I thought, as I said, I let it fester, but I was really frustrating. But that wasn't at the time, maybe that wasn't the particular right platform. It just wasn't the time. This is the right platform. This is the time, and everything that she has to say and is going to say, in my piece, we need to hear it now more than ever. So listening to my values, I think that's what makes me feel like a powerhouse, even if nobody's looking or listening. It's right.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Such a beautiful example, and really highlights why I've quickly become one of your biggest fans in life and in business. So thank you so much for spending some time with us on this platform. And I cannot wait to see so much more from you.
Lindsay, thank you for everything you're doing. You have shifted the world and you've changed lives. You really have. Thank you.